evening and welcome to World Today. I'm Shreya Upadhyay, and in the next 1 hour we'll get to you the big global news, starting of course with the Quad Leaders Summit, which is scheduled to be held on Friday this week. Now, amid the Chinese aggression and the political crisis in Myanmar, it's going to be an extremely significant meet of the grouping. Now, apart from this, the royal mess of the Buckingham Palace and the current numbers of COVID-19 worldwide, all of this and much more packed for you in the next 60 minutes. But first, let's take a look at the headlines that we are tracking. First ever summit of the leaders of the quadrilateral framework to take place virtually on 12th of March. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be participating along with Australia's Scott Morrison and Japan's Yoshihide Suga. President of US Joseph Biden will also participate. 2 days after Prince Harry and Duchess Meghan's sensational interview with Oprah Winfrey, Buckingham Palace finally reacts. Queen Elizabeth says she's saddened by Harry and Meghan's experiences, promises to privately address revelations about a racist remark. Protests continue unabated in Myanmar. Protesters stage a sit-in protest even as security forces have cracked down on demonstrations. Civil disobedience movement cripples government business, unleashing strikes at banks, factories and shops. Google disables some army-linked accounts. World battles COVID-19. Over 11 crore 82 lakh people have contracted COVID-19 globally. Recovery stand over 9 crore 39 lakh. Virus has so far claimed over 26 lakh 24,000 lives worldwide. And no audience and virtual nominees, but Bafta promises to offer 2 award shows this year. Nomadland rocks her lead film nominations for the 2021 Bafta Awards for women to compete for the Best Director. India's Adarsh Gaurav scores a nod for White Tiger. All right, let's begin with our big news. Now, in the first ever summit between the leaders of Quad member countries, the leaders of India, US, Japan and Australia will virtually meet on the 12th of March. Now, Quad will discuss regional and global issues and exchange views on the harmony of the Indo-Pacific region. But with the China factor still a huge concern, what's really going to be on the agenda when Prime Minister Modi meets President Biden and PMs Morrison and Suga? Take a look in this report.
Keeping the China challenge squarely in their sights, the first summit meeting of the Quad, India, US, Japan and Australia will take place virtually on 12th March. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be participating along with Prime Minister of Australia Scott Morrison and Prime Minister of Japan Yoshihide Suga and President of US Joseph R. Biden in the first Leaders Summit of the Quadrilateral Framework. The leaders will discuss regional and global issues of shared interest and exchange views on practical areas of cooperation towards maintaining a free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific region. The summit will provide an opportunity to exchange views on contemporary challenges such as resilient supply chains, emerging and critical technologies, maritime security and climate change. White House spokeswoman Jen Psaki said the meeting of the Quad countries indicates the importance Biden places in US allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific region.
On Friday morning, President Biden will meet virtually with his counterparts in the Quad, Prime Minister Suga of Japan, Prime Minister Modi of India, and Prime Minister Morrison of Australia. Formed in the aftermath of the 2004 tsunami and formalized in 2007, the Quad has met regularly at the working and foreign minister level. However, Friday will be the first time that the Quad is meeting at the leader level. That President Biden has made this one of his earliest multilateral engagements speaks to the importance we place on close cooperation with our allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific. A range of issues, of course, will be discussed. We expect to be discussed, I should say, facing the global community, from the threat of COVID to economic cooperation and, of course, to the climate crisis.
The leaders will also discuss ongoing efforts to combat COVID-19 pandemic and explore opportunities for collaboration in ensuring safe, equitable and affordable vaccines in the Indo-Pacific region. Dr. S. Jaishankar, Minister of External Affairs, participated in the 3rd India-Australia-Japan-USA Quad ministerial meeting held on 18 February 2021 with his counterparts Foreign Minister Marise Payne, Foreign Minister Toshimitsu Motegi and Secretary of State Antony Blinken. The ministers highlighted their shared attributes as political democracies, market economies and pluralistic societies. They recognized that the changes underway in the world makes a strong case for the countries working closely together. It was important for the international community that the direction of changes remains positive and beneficial to all. Quadrilateral security dialogue is an informal strategic dialogue between India, USA, Japan and Australia with a shared objective to ensure and support a free, open and prosperous Indo-Pacific region. World Today Desk, TD India.
All right, before I go to my guest, let me just quickly take you through, what Quad is really all about, it's going to be, the agenda on it. Quad, what is it? Now, Quadrilateral Security Dialogue is an informal strategic dialogue between India, US, Japan and Australia with focus on the Indo-Pacific region. Remember, there are shared interests between all these countries in the region. Now, the idea of Quad first was mooted by former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in 2007. 2004 is when it started, but till 2007 is the year when it was actually the inception happened. Now in November 2017, India, United States, Australia and Japan gave shape to the long pending Quad coalition that finally fructified with shared interests. There were regional security issues and of course other bilateral issues that had to be focused upon. Now in 2020, all 4 Quad nations participated in the Malabar naval exercise. Remember, this is an exercise which happens between, this is, a tri-naval exercise. Australia doesn't take part in it, but it happens alternatively in the Indian and the Pacific Ocean. Now, global issues like COVID-19, pandemic, climate change, maritime security, resilience, supply chains has always been on the agenda. And of course, after COVID-19, that is also going to be one of the major issues. Now, what has the Indian External Affairs Ministry said? It said leaders will exchange views on practical areas of cooperation towards maintaining a free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific region. That's going to be a major focus, the harmony of the Indo-Pacific region. Remember, we've all seen Chinese aggression at the borders and it is therefore coming at a very significant time, this meeting of the leaders of Quad nations. Now, what has the White House said? It has said that this reflects the importance that we place on the close cooperation with allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific. Remember, there have been concerns about the new administration of Joe Biden taking over after Donald Trump and what his priorities will be. But clearly, the White House has stated that, this is the allies and the partners in the Indo-Pacific region are on the priority list. Now, remember, on 18th February this year, the foreign ministers of Quad members had met, and this has been a tradition of the Quad nations that the foreign ministers meet. But this is the first time this year that the leaders, the prime ministers and presidents of the 4 Quad nations will be meeting. Now, what happened in the meeting when the foreign ministers met? Well, they emphasized commitment to uphold rules-based international order, respect for territorial integrity, and peaceful resolution of disputes. Again, pointing towards the Chinese notoriety at the borders and therefore how important it is for the Quad members to come and really work together towards the cooperation of the region. Now, let me just go across to my guest, Mr. Anil Wadhwa, who has been the former secretary in the External Affairs Ministry East. Thanks very much, sir, for joining us on World Today on DD India. Now, if we see since the Biden administration took over, there have been foreign policy traditionalists, there have been observers in Delhi and Washington who have cast their doubts over, the Biden administration going a little mild in terms of its relationship with India, or, going a little mild on standing up to China. But really, this does lay down to rest all those doubts which were cast about the Indo-US relationship, because the White House has really come forward and said that this reflects the priority that Joe Biden, places on this region.
Absolutely. I think this is a very significant summit meeting because, as was pointed out by you and the others earlier, this is the first time since 2007 that the Quad is meeting at the summit level. We must note that there's been a gradual evolution and scaling up of the level at which the Quad has been meeting, starting off from the working level meetings to the foreign ministerial meetings, and after that, now the summit. So one must note that there is an emphasis on raising the level and making sure that proper decisions are taken at that level. Secondly, what you outlined, the renewed administration of the United States, renewed interest of the United States under the Biden administration to make sure that the concept of the Indo-Pacific and the policies of the United States on the Indo-Pacific are kept alive through the Quad. So this is the right way to go by taking together all the like-minded countries and like-minded democracies who've already come together under this umbrella, and to make sure that that they follow a coordinated approach in dealing with the threatening posture that the Chinese have adopted over the past few years in particular. And thirdly, of course, is the widening of the agenda of the Quad. So from a quadrilateral security dialogue, now we see it evolving into a quadrilateral, framework which can tackle a number of other issues which are of pressing concern. Something like maritime security was always something emphasized in the past. Connectivity was another issue, but now we've added resilient supply chains to it and new and emerging technologies, and at the same time, the concept of interoperability. And I believe there's going to be a very important naval exercise which will follow from 25th to the 27th of April, following the summit meeting in the Gulf of Oman, which will certainly give the Quad a new direction.
All right, Mr. Baba, if I could just go back a little in time and see how, the U.S. relationship with China was during the time of Donald Trump, and how there were, concerns of how Joe Biden, the new president of the United States, will be a little mild, will go a little soft. But if I could just quote the National Security Advisor of the United States, Jake Sullivan, he said, Quad meeting, this upcoming meeting, should be seen as the foundation upon which to build substantial American policy. What do you think will be the American policy now vis-a-vis, the Chinese notoriety that the whole world has seen during the pandemic?
In the United States, China is clearly seen as a competitor, and not only a competitor, but also an aggressor in some respects. And that policy, which was followed by the Trump administration, is being followed by the Biden administration as well. But there's a difference in approach, where the Biden administration is going about countering China in a way which is coordinated with others in the region. And not only in the region of Indo-Pacific, but also all around the world. And I believe that will be the way forward for the Biden administration, which I believe is also the right way to go when you take everybody along, because that becomes then more effective. I do not think there's any let-up in terms of going soft on China just because certain pronouncements were made earlier, where the Biden administration made clear that they would be working with China in certain respects, but at the same time telling China where to get off, and at the same time drawing red lines. And this is exactly the approach that Biden administration is taking.
And probably, President Biden also has a lot to look at within United States than to actually, disturb his ties with other countries of the world, which Donald Trump has already established, isn't it?
Yes, of course. I mean, the Biden administration will build on the ties that were there earlier with allies and partners. And I would emphasize partners because a country like India, for instance, is seen as a very important partner. We are not an ally. But we work together with the United States, and the United States sees countries like ours as those which can actually work towards its interests and also work towards containment of Chinese aggressive policies.
Mr. Vatwa, when the foreign ministers of the Quad members met in February, there was, India's stand. One of the points that India mentioned was the supporting of ASEAN's, centrality and cohesion. How far do you think, a grouping like Quad would help in sort of bringing in harmony in the Indo-Pacific region and, of course, sort of containing Chinese aggression, if I can use this phrase?
But I think taking the ASEAN along in any policy which is adopted is very important for the Indo-Pacific region. ASEAN is a substantial grouping of 10 countries, although divided in terms of its approach to the Chinese aggression, which the Chinese have managed to do very successfully. But at the same time, the ASEAN looks towards towards countries who can actually help them in their development, economically, as well as now post-COVID with the vaccines production and distribution. So therefore, and plus you must remember there's been the Chinese BRI, which has been dominant in the region, and they're looking for alternatives and alternate sources of funding, which can come from the countries of the Quad, who've already decided to pool in resources. There is a Blue Dot network, which has been enunciated by the United States, Japan, and Australia. India has been invited to join that, which will set new standards in terms of certification of infrastructure projects, which are not exploitative, which are transparent, and which will provide alternate sources of funding for infrastructure projects in the region. So ASEAN in sum is very important in terms of any policy which is adopted towards the region, in taking the region along, and the Quad can certainly help in working with the ASEAN countries towards that objective in the region.
Okay. And let me just focus on, India's relationship with the other two Quad members, that is Japan and Australia. We know that, of course, we worked together during the pandemic. The challenges of pandemic, we've all solved together. But even during the time that India needed these two partners, these two countries, when China was acting notorious at the borders, they were there. And, whether it was the naval exercises or coming out and supporting India, the two countries were there. And recently, of course, Prime Minister Modi had a telephonic conversation with Japanese Premier Sugo. And the Japanese Prime Minister also mentioned, concerns about the rising China influence and the disturbance that it causes in the South China Sea. How do you see the relationship between all these three countries, India, Japan, and Australia? And of course, how this can help further, us, India?
It's quite clear that although the Quad countries do not name China in particular, and India in fact talks about an inclusive Indo-Pacific, yet at the same time the elephant in the room is China.
Yes.
And its aggressive policies, which have ranged from the Sea of Japan to the African coast in the Indian Ocean. And the reason is quite simple, because China has not stopped its aggressive policies, whether it's towards the ASEAN, whether it's on the border with India, whether it's the trade war with Australia, or the aggressive policies in the East China Sea or the South China Sea, which borders Japan today. And coupled with this is these policies towards Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Xinjiang, which is bothering all free democracies and everyone in the region who's concerned with peaceful settlement of disputes and stability in the region. And therefore, these countries, when they come together, they have similar outlook on these issues. They are democracies which stand for a free and open Indo-Pacific, and they are willing to come together to coordinate their policies now, not just in the security domain, but also in the economic sphere, and also to face the new challenges which are arising in the world today. And COVID-19 vaccination production, for instance, is one such issue. If there can be some investment which can be drawn into India for production and distribution of vaccines in the region, that can actually become a game changer. And also at the same time, if you look at the Resilient Supply Chain Initiative, already initiated between India, Australia, and Japan, and if US can join in that endeavor, then that can make a big difference in the region.
So, Mr. Wadhwa, over the years, we've seen that the common interests that are shared by Quad members have been, harmony, peace in the Indo-Pacific region, maritime security, and now, of course, we have the COVID challenge. And like you said, whether it is in terms of vaccination, bringing in investment for the COVID-19 vaccination to India or other shared interests, what do you think are going to be the sort of, highlights of the discussions or the takeaways for all the Quad members this time?
I think we already have an indication of how this agenda is going to go. First of all, there's definitely going to be a focused discussion on the practical steps that need to be adopted to ensure that there is stability in the region. There is emphasis on peaceful settlement of disputes. In other words, a euphemism of how to counter the Chinese aggression in the region. But at the same time, to focus on the new issues that have arisen. The vaccination issue, the production of vaccines and the distribution to the region is one. There's also the question, as I mentioned, of the resilient supply chains, where how these countries can come together in that respect. The focus on new and emerging technologies, the e-mobility program, for instance, which India has embarked upon, the critical minerals and rare earths which are in shortage due to the Chinese cornering of resources, and how the others can actually rely on themselves for these critical resources in the future. That's all going to be discussed. And at the same time, you have new and emerging technologies like the 5G, for instance, and how these countries can come together. Plus the connectivity issue that remains on the table, how to bring about alternate sources of funding in that respect. So we have a full agenda there, and I'm sure the burning issues like Myanmar, Xinjiang, Taiwan, Hong Kong will all figure in the discussions.
Yes, in fact, I was coming to that, Mr. Wadhwa. Myanmar, it's been, a sort of never-ending political crisis there. And the foreign ministers, when they met in February, they did indicate towards a peaceful transition in the country. But, how far do you think that discussion between the Quad countries will actually help the current situation in Myanmar?
Well, if you look at the Quad countries, at least India and Japan have very close relationship with Myanmar. India being a neighbor, Japan being a big investor into Myanmar. The United States in the past used to be a very big investor and a major influence maker in Myanmar. At the same time, Australia has been expanding its influence in Myanmar. But they have different approaches on how to restore democracy in Myanmar and how to go about engaging with the military regime which has taken over there. And therefore, that is an issue which will be discussed. I think all four countries will have to pool in their resources to make sure that there is restoration of democracy and the best way to go about doing it.
All right. Lastly, Mr. Wadhwa, the Quad as a concept was, the inception happened in 2007. And really the focus that time was, of course, after the tsunami. And, basically the aim was for disaster relief and humanitarian aid. But over the past few years, it has really evolved into something much more than that. How do you see that journey and how do you see the road ahead for the Quad grouping?
I think the agenda of the Quad is expanded exponentially. Compared to where we were in 2007. It has had its ups and downs and some periods where countries were very hesitant to go forward in this grouping because of the China factor and the economic dependency on China. But over the years, given Chinese aggressive policies towards all the countries of the Quad, obviously there's a meeting of mind on that issue. And in fact, today they do not hesitate to call it a grouping which is essential going forward in order to counter the growing Chinese aggressiveness. So we've come a long way. And at the same time, as I said earlier, the issue of interoperability and the Quad navies exercising together is going to become a feature in the coming days and years. And at the same time, I'm sure you will see a more working level groups being formed, which will follow up between the summit periods where they will report to the summit or to the foreign ministers. So all in all, I think we're set for a much richer Quad agenda in the future, which will benefit all the four countries.
All right, thanks very much to Mr. Anil Vadva for joining us on DD India and helping us understand why Quad is important in today's time. All right, moving on. Now, 2 days after Meghan and Harry spoke with Oprah Winfrey in a sensational televised interview, the Buckingham Palace has finally responded. While Prince Charles, Harry's father, has refused to comment, the Queen has said that she's saddened by what the couple had to experience. Here's what all the royal family has stated.
2 days after Prince Harry and Duchess Meghan's sensational interview with Oprah Winfrey, Buckingham Palace has finally reacted. Queen Elizabeth said on March 9th the British royals were saddened by the challenging experiences of her grandson Prince Harry and his wife Meghan, and promised to privately address revelations about a racist remark about their son. Britain's heir to the throne, Prince Charles, made his first public appearance on March 9th since Meghan and his son Prince Harry's interview with Oprah Winfrey, but he declined to comment. As he left a vaccination centre in London, Charles was asked what he thought of the interview in which Meghan said a member of the royal family had made racist comment and she had been pushed to the point of considering suicide. Charles stopped and looked up during the visit to the Jesus House NHS vaccination centre, but turned and walked away without answering. Prince Harry and Meghan's TV interview is the biggest challenge to the British monarchy, but supporters say it will survive, at least while Elizabeth is the Queen.
I think it's early days to start talking about what damage there has been to the royal brand. I mean, certainly there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of uncomfortable headlines about mental health issues and, of course, racism. But when you are in the middle of a sort of tornado of this sort of size, you've got to make some key strategic moves to achieve some normality, to build a platform, a communications platform to move onto.
Meghan, in an interview with Oprah Winfrey aired on United States television on March 7th, accused Britain's royal family of raising concerns about how dark their son Archie's skin might be and ignoring her plea for help while she considered suicide. Meghan and Harry's interview has dragged the royals into their biggest crisis since the death of Harry's mother Diana in 1997, when the family, led by Queen Elizabeth, was widely criticized for being too slow to respond. World Today Desk, DD India.
All right, moving to Myanmar, in what has come to be one of the defining images of the current political crisis in Myanmar, a nun kneeled in front of the police to protect children from police firing as protesters in the second city of Myanmar joined the sit-in demonstration. Yangon witnessed protesters running amid the sound of firing, even as the government business was crippled and strikes were seen at banks, factories and shops since the army took over in the nation.
Protests continue unabated in Myanmar. In Mandalay, protesters staged a sit-in protest on Wednesday even as security forces have cracked down on demonstrations. A video from Reuters showed protesters running after hearing the sound of firing in the Yangon township of North Saigon. It came as Myanmar security forces surrounded the staff compound of striking railway workers opposed to the military junta, and ousted lawmakers appointed an acting vice president to take over the duties of detained politicians. The railway staff in Yangon are part of a civil disobedience movement that has crippled government business and included strikes at banks, factories and shops since the army ousted Aung San Suu Kyi's elected government in a coup on February 1. A civil disobedience movement has crippled government businesses, unleashing strikes at banks, factories and shops since the army ousted Aung San Suu Kyi's elected governmentship in a coup. Fuel importers have switched to other forms of payment such as telegraphic transfers after protest against a military coup disrupted trade, driving February imports to their lowest in more than 3 years. Google has also said it is reviewing recent advertisements run by a Myanmar military-backed telecommunications firm and has disabled some army-linked accounts on its services in the wake of the country's coup. The move comes as activists called on the US technology giant to restrict access to its services after dozens of deaths following weeks of protests. A nun's sister, Anne Rose Nu Tong, kneeled before police officers in the city of Myanmar on Monday to ask security forces to refrain from violence against children and residents, but of no respite.
We all kneeled on the ground to make a request to them. They said they will crack down on protest. As I said, I don't want to see any trouble here and can't leave if police don't leave. I begged them not to shoot the children because I'm worried about people in the hospital nearby and residents living around here.
US has once again reacted on Myanmar's violence.
We are repulsed by the military regime's continued use of lethal force against the people of Burma. We strongly condemn the use of violence by Burmese security forces against the Burmese people, including peaceful protesters, journalists, and other elements of civil society. We urge, and we continue to urge, the Burmese military to exercise maximum restraint. The latest escalations that we've seen in recent days of violence, it's just another indication of the military's complete disregard for the people of Burma. It's unacceptable. The United States will continue to hold to account those responsible. Many of our partners and allies around the world have enacted measures of their own. We continue to work with partners and allies to speak with one voice and to act consistently with one another.
The army took over and arrest of elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi has plunged Myanmar into chaos. Security forces have killed many protesters and detained more than 1,800 since then. With inputs from agencies, World Today Desk, DD India.
The US State Department on Tuesday blacklisted 2 Iranian officials from Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, accusing them of their involvement in human rights violations during 2019 and 2020 protests in Iran. The US State Department has stated that IRGC officials Ali Hematian and Masood Safdari and their immediate family members are now ineligible for entry into United States. The department spokesperson, Ned Price, said at a briefing that the United States is committed to promoting accountability for those responsible for human rights violations and abuses, and that includes those in Iran. The FBI has released new security footage on Tuesday of the suspect who placed pipe bombs outside the Republican National Committee and Democratic National Committee headquarters in Washington on 5th of January. The FBI authorities continue to seek more information about the suspect. 2 pipe bombs near the Democratic and Republican Party headquarters were planted on the 5th of January this year, the night before the insurrection at the Capitol. The videos, which offer multiple angles from several surveillance cameras, offer a clearer look at a masked individual who is wearing a hood as the person moves through neighborhoods and near the RNC and DNC. The FBI has previously released photographs of the suspect, who can be seen wearing a grey hoodie and black and light grey Nike Air Max speed shoes. All right, after that, let's now take a look at the update on the COVID-19 numbers from across the world. So far, over 11 crore 82 lakh people have contracted COVID-19 globally, while the tally of recoveries stand over 9 crore 39 lakh. The COVID-19 has claimed over 26 lakh 24,000 lives worldwide. US, meanwhile, continues to remain the worst affected from COVID-19, where more than 2 crore 98 lakh cases of COVID-19 have been reported. The country's fatalities have crossed 5 lakh 40,000. Now, the US House of Representatives will today vote on President Joe Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief plan. The chamber aims to approve the rescue package in time for President Joe Biden to sign it before the key unemployment program expires on Sunday. The Senate passed the legislation on Saturday. President Biden has already said that he will sign the legislation as soon as it reaches his desk. Meanwhile, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said that U.S. Treasury will work to quickly distribute $350 billion in aid to state and local governments from the stimulus bill. The Treasury is also responsible for sending out $1,400 payments to individuals as part of Biden's $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan Act.
In the coming days, our Treasury team is going to work to get this aid out in the quickest way possible and the one that produces the greatest impact. To do that, we're going to need your input and advice. If we do our job, I'm confident that Americans will make it to the other side of this pandemic and be met there with a measure of prosperity. By the end of the year, I expect your city economies will resemble 2019 much more than 2020.
Now, Brazil, the second worst hit country from coronavirus after United States, has shot another grim milestone. The South American country registered over 1,970 fatalities in a single day, taking the total toll to cross 268,500. Now, Brazil's health authorities have been scrambling to tackle a constant uptick in the number of cases of COVID-19. Rio de Janeiro-based research institute Fiocruz has revealed that more than 80% of the intensive care unit beds are occupied in the capitals of 25 of Brazil's 27 states. Now, in 15 of Brazil's largest cities, 90% of the ICU beds have been occupied, and the government has vaccinated just 3.5% of its total population. It has registered more than 1,11,25,000 cases of the disease. Moving on, the coronavirus situation has worsened in Palestine as well. The health system in Palestine is on the brink of collapse, with intensive care units operating at 100% capacity in some areas of the West Bank. The Palestinian authorities have introduced full lockdowns over the past 2 weeks to contain the exponential rise in the number of cases of COVID-19. The West Bank and Gaza, which are home to a combined 5.2 million Palestinians, have received around 34,700 vaccine doses till date. These came from small donations by Israel and Russia, as well as 20,000 which were sent by the United Arab Emirates to Gaza. The European Union is likely to issue its approval for the COVID-19 vaccine of Johnson & Johnson soon. Addressing a news conference, French Commissioner Thierry Breton said the approval for Johnson & Johnson jab would bring the number of vaccines available in the European Union to 4. Now, this would help the EU meet its target of 300 million doses in the second quarter, even if some of the producers experience problems. Well, during a visit to the European Union's headquarters in Brussels, US climate change envoy John Kerry said that this year's United Nations Climate Summit is the world's last and best hope to address the environmental crisis. Nearly 200 countries, remember, committed under the Paris Accord to halt the increase in global temperatures to levels that would avoid the worst impacts of climate change. And after that, now let's see what all other stories are making headlines across the globe in our segment News at a Glance.
At least 39 migrants died when 2 boats sank off the Tunisian coast as they tried to cross the Mediterranean to the Italian island of Lampedusa. According to Tunisian Defense Ministry, the Coast Guard rescued 165 others. All the dead migrants were from sub-Saharan Africa. In Greece, thousands of protesters registered their discontent over police violence, triggering clashes in which 1 police officer was injured. The demonstration in the suburb of Nea Samiri in the capital Athens was staged after a video released on social media depicted policemen beating a man with batons. Riot police fired tear gas to disperse a group of protesters. Meanwhile, the authorities have launched an investigation into the use of force by the police in the incident. Clashes erupted between protesters and police in Armenia's capital, Yerevan. Hundreds of outraged protesters gathered to demand resignation of Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, who's been in power since 2018. The protesters also set up tents at the service entrance to the building of the Armenian parliament. Portugal President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa on Tuesday was sworn in for his second term with a message of hope after a year of the pandemic. Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa takes over the presidency at a time when the country is still in an emergency state and with a lockdown in place to fight the spread of the coronavirus. President of Equatorial Guinea, Teodoro Obiang Nguema, visited the scene of deadly blasts at a military barracks in the city of Bafta that left 98 people dead. At least 615 people were injured by the explosions. The president attributed the accident to negligence related to the handling of dynamite and said the explosions damaged almost all homes and buildings in Bafta, a city of just over 250,000 people. Spain has sent an aid plane to Equatorial Guinea on Tuesday as the search for victims of a series of explosions gathered pace. Spain's foreign ministry said in a statement that it's sending a plane carrying medicines and medical supplies worth up to 60,000 euros. Hours after a Brazilian Supreme Court judge annulled the criminal convictions against former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro said he hoped it would be overturned when it's reviewed by the full Supreme Court. Former head of Catalonia's regional government, Carles Puigdemont, announced at a news conference in Brussels that he would appeal against the European Parliament's decision to waive his immunity. Earlier on Tuesday, the Parliament had voted in favour of stripping the immunity from prosecution of Carles Puigdemont and two former cabinet ministers, Tony Comín and Clara Ponsati. Floods have totaled houses in Hawaii as the state's National Weather Service issued a series of flash flood warnings. Authorities on Wednesday extended aerial flood advisory and flash flood emergencies for Hawaii, urging people in the vicinity to seek higher ground. World Today Desk, DD India.
Well, the British Academy of Film and Television Arts, popularly known as Bafta, has announced its nomination for this year's film awards. The recession drama Nomadland and coming-of-age story Rocks is leading the list for the Best Film category with 7 nods each. In the foreign language film category, another round from Denmark is competing with Dear Comrades from Russia, La Miserables from France, and Korean language film Minari are among others. All right, Bafta is also celebrating women power this time, as 4 out of 6 nominations on the list in the Best Director category are women. The nominations include Chloe Zhao for Nomadland and Sarah Gavron for Rocks. This year's leading actor nominees include Riz Ahmed for his portrayal of a heavy metal drummer going deaf in Sound of Metal, and the late Chadwick Boseman for his role in the 1920s jazz drama Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. Adarsh Gaurav, meanwhile, from India, has also got a nomination for The White Tiger. Leading actress nominees include Bucky Bakray for Rocks and Frances McDormand for Nomadland. This year there will be 2 virtual ceremonies. The announced date for Bafta this year is the 11th of April. And now here is your daily fix of offbeat, funny and unique stories which are beyond headlines.
Pain is like a stab on body parts, but healing from it is always like breathing again in fresh air. The same seems to be true for Japan 10 years after it recovered from the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami. Students in South Korea painted the then scenario of Japan while the calamity struck it on March 11, 2011. Toshiharu Onoda, a 13th generation potter living in a town close to Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant, had just finished loading his kin on March 11, 2011 when the massive earthquake struck. Clinging to a wall as the room filled with choking dust, Onoda watched stunned as his 2-ton kin began to move across the floor. Now restrictions relaxed, the unique pottery that Onoda and his fellows produce, Oborisoma Yaki, known for the high-pitched singing sound made when kin are opened and glazed cracks, has finally come back home as Onoda is planning to open a new workshop in downtown Nami. A live stream camera at New Zealand's Tairoa Head Nature Reserve captured a royal albatross face-planting in an attempted landing, with a video watched thousands of times on YouTube. As one albatross sits, another comes in and lands face first, quickly righting itself before walking away from the camera. Royal Cam is a 24-hour live stream of an albatross nest during the breeding season set up by the New Zealand Department of Conservation and the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Teachers and students of Turkmen Agricultural University visited Balkan Vilayat on a business trip to conduct a study on Turkman horses. The purpose of this trip was to study behavior and habitat of steppe horses living in the region. Currently, their herds are found on the coast of the Caspian Sea. Stuntman hunter Ray Barker has gone to extreme lengths to bring more diners to his favorite local restaurant by sitting in a bean dip for 24 hours. Barker became concerned that Los Toros Mexican restaurant was struggling because of the pandemic. Growing up, it was the restaurant he visited regularly with his family whenever there was a celebration. So to try and bring attention to the business and encourage people to go there and eat outdoors or order takeout, he decided to do something he's never done before. The bean dip was Barker's own concoction, mixing beans with starch flour and seasoning. He also developed some technology to help him survive the 24 hours. The identity of Banksy remains a mystery, but even anonymously, he has earned worldwide acclaim for his witty, subversive street art, and his works can fetch millions of dollars. Munich-based curator Oliver Foster has now gathered the most extensive collection of the artist's works at one place, as he wants to allow as many people as possible to see Banksy's development as an artist. The Munich exhibition runs until May 2nd under the usual corona restrictions. Google on Wednesday celebrated the 89th birthday of renowned Indian professor and scientist Udupi Ramachandra Rao, remembered by many as India's satellite man. Rao, who was an Indian space scientist and chairman of ISRO, supervised the 1975 launch of India's first satellite, Aryabhatta. The doodle feature a sketch of Professor Rao with a background of the Earth and shooting stars. With growing demand for eco-friendly products, companies on an Estonian island are looking to make drinking straws made of locally grown reeds to go mainstream. Women there are taking the local and quickly renewable plant and turning it into plastic-free straws. These drinking straws made of reed are reusable, biodegradable, and their production is scalable. They are also working with scientists to develop biocomposite material made of reed leftovers to produce plates, cups, and other single-use products. Red rivers of lava and plumes of orange smoke erupted from Klushevskaya Sopka strata volcano on the Russian Kamchatka Peninsula. Video filmed by eyewitness from the top of Erman Glacier showed the volcano shooting ash and lava into the air. The summit eruption of the 4,835-meter high volcano ended on February 8th, but since the middle of February it has been emitting side eruptions. Volcanic bombs with diameter of 30 to 50 centimeters have been ejected from cracks on the mountain slopes. Balmain models took to plain runways to display the Fall-Winter 2021 collection, shot in a cavernous hangar at the Charles de Gaulle Airport in and around a recently underused Air France 777. Designer Olivier Rousteing embraced the escapist nature of his collection. Accessories included neck pillow earrings, handbags, paper plane suitcase charms, and compass pendants. The final destination was revealed to be outer space as models walked in, lit up, and suspended runways in silver outfits reminiscent of spacesuits. World Today Desk, DD India.
Well, on to some other news now. FC Porto defeated the Italian heavyweight Juventus to advance to the quarterfinals of the Champions League. Porto, playing with 10 players for most of the second half, was able to defeat Juventus thanks to Sergio Oliveiro's goal in the 115th minute. Now, this match of the second leg was won by Juventus 2-2 at home. Porto won 2-1 in the first leg. In this way, the aggregate score was equal to 4-4 after both legs. However, due to 2 away goals, Porto won the match. Federico and Roberto scored goals in this match for the Juventus, while Sergio Oliveira managed to score both goals for Porto. And German club Borussia Dortmund have made it to the quarterfinals of the Champions League. Borussia managed to defeat Sevilla in a match played on late Tuesday night, and in the second leg, the match between the two teams was 2-2. However, in the first leg, Dortmund won the match 3-2. On this side, the German club made it to the last 8 after having an aggregate score of 5-4. Haaland scored both the goals for Dortmund in the second leg, and Haaland has scored 20 goals in 14 Champions League matches. At the same time, he has become the first player to score 2 or more goals in 4 consecutive Champions League matches. Now, Barcelona travelled to Parc des Princes, hoping to overturn a 4-1 deficit from the first leg of their Champions League last 16 battle with Paris Saint-Germain. Paris Saint-Germain thrashed Barcelona in the first leg but cannot afford to be overconfident going into this game. Barcelona, remember, have been a resurgent force this month and have enjoyed an excellent week both on and off the pitch. The Catalans stunned Sevilla with a brilliant comeback in the Copa del Rey last week and will need to pull off a similar result in this match. Meanwhile, Paris Saint-Germain have managed to recover from a slow start to their season and will be intent on winning a treble in the coming months. The French champions have kept clean sheets in their last 3 games and will be confident ahead of this fixture. Barcelona have a marginal advantage over Paris Saint-Germain as far as the head-to-head record is concerned and have won 4 out of the 9 matches played between the two teams. Paris Saint-Germain have managed 3 victories against Barcelona and have troubled their Catalan opponents in recent years. The first leg took place last month and ended in an emphatic 4-1 victory for Paris Saint-Germain at the Camp Nou. Kylian Mbappe scored a sensational hat-trick on the day and will want to make his mark on this fixture as well. RB Leipzig will look to overturn a 2-0 deficit as they take on Liverpool in the second leg of their UEFA Champions League round of 16 tie. Due to COVID-19 quarantine rules, the venue of the second leg of the round of 16 match between Liverpool and RB Leipzig has been shifted from Anfield to Budapest. Bundesliga clubs will otherwise have to quarantine for 2 weeks, and going by their home form of late, Liverpool might not feel too bad about the venue change. And after that, let's turn the pages of history and see what major events took place on this day in our segment Today in History.
It was on this day in 1801 when the first detailed national census of Great Britain, consisting of England, Scotland and Wales under the Census Act 1800, had started and kept on taking place on every 10 years. The 1801 census estimated the population of England and Wales to be 8.9 million and that of Scotland was 1.6 million. Ireland was not included in the census until 1821. On March 10th in 1876, the first ever speech is transmitted over telephone invented by Alexander Graham Bell. It was when Alexander Graham Bell summoned his assistant in another room by saying, "Mr. Watson, come here, I want to see you." And his assistant showed up. Bell had received a comprehensive telephone patent just 3 days before. It was on this day in 1940 when renowned playwright David Rabe was born in United States, Iowa. He was an American playwright, screenwriter and novelist whose work was known for its use of grotesque humor, satire and surreal fantasy. It was on this day in 1948 when Czech Foreign Minister Jan Masaryk killed himself by jumping from a window at the Foreign Ministry in Prague shortly after Soviet-backed communists took power. As a statesman and diplomat, he served as Foreign Minister in both the Czechoslovak government in London during World War II and the post-war coalition government of Czechoslovakia. It was on March 10th in the year 2007 when Canadian scientists restored the world's largest dinosaur skeleton in Berlin. The team reconstructed the skeleton of 12.5 meter high and 23 meter long Brachiosaurus. The Brachiosaurus is considered one of the largest dinosaurs to have ever walked the earth. World Today Desk, DD India.
On that note of the dinosaur, it's a wrap in World Today, but news and updates continue on DD India. Stay tuned. Thanks for joining us right now. Namaskar.